Good evening, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session with People+AI, partnership that we are really glad that we've been able to forge. The first thing I want to ask you is, when you saw David on screen and you saw his picture, what was going on in your mind? For a crowd that is hopefully 50 plus, 45 plus, the first thing that struck Ashok and me as we walked up to People+AI office a couple of weeks ago was, oh my God, he's in his 30s. Will he even understand who we are and what we want to do? And we were more than pleasantly surprised. Because what came out of that conversation was David saw immense possibilities of collaboration between second careers, the people we have on second careers, the domain experience, the expertise, the perspectives you have to offer to the cause that he is serving. So it was a delight when David said, hey, I see so many possibilities with second careers. I'd be happy to bring a session on application of AI for the professionals who are registered on your platform. What David has been involved in, and the two words that came to mind, David, as I heard you speak, was innovation and impact. Looking at how you can use AI to really change lives, to really have a huge impact, social impact in the country. And you're leading charge as the director of programs and as the head of People+AI to actually build prototypes using AI, build use cases. You're doing this with a set of volunteers who are like the people we have on our platform, the professionals we have on our platform. And you're bringing it to life with the help of technologists who are AI experts. So what a great opportunity for second careers as well, David. We promised our professionals that we would help bring the latest technologies to our audience, to our professionals, to our members. And we would help them to learn about it in multiple ways. And it couldn't be better than to start with how can we apply AI in a practical manner? How can we use our background and experience to see what impact we can have at scale? We will follow this up with some other sessions for our professionals on AI. So it's a series that we have planned, but this is the first one. It's an introduction to AI through application. With that, I'm just going to turn it over to you, David. Everybody is excited to hear about the use cases and what you have to present, and then talk about the opportunities for our professionals.
Yeah,
so over.
Sounds good, Shanti. Thank you so much for having me, and I want to thank Ashok, Sushma, Sudha, the rest of the Second Careers founding team. I have done many sessions on AI, but this one's unique because, like you rightly said, we've had a very mixed demographic in our community. I was telling Sushma just before this, we have almost 200 Indians that are based in the US and very excited about what's happening with AI in India. And so that's like kind of a pocket we have. We have several professionals at the end of their career, and many of them are kind of at a stage where they've climbed the corporate ladder or the ladder of their industry. And now looking to give back in a way, or looking to find impactful projects that they can work on. And then we have many people that are mid-career professionals that are just very excited about the potential of innovation, especially innovation for a cause. That being said, this one's special because this is my very first time talking to an entire group of late career professionals. Actually, to be honest, I don't know if that's the right term or whether that's offensive. So I'm sorry if it was. But thank you
We're
for
still figuring it out, David. So it's all right.
And yeah, like you rightly said, I'm in my mid-30s now. Recently became a dad, so I have a 3-month-old son at home. So it's been a very different stage of life than many of you. But hopefully, we'll find a lot of fun things to talk about that are in common. And then I guess primarily for this conversation, it'll be AI. Let me do this. If it's okay with you, we can. I'll start off with a short presentation, and then post that. Very happy to make this an interactive session. And even during my presentation, if you have questions, comments you'd like to make, feel free to stop me, interrupt. In case I'm not able to see the chat, you can just unmute, interrupt, and I'm happy to pause and take questions right there. But let me tell you a basic story about why we do the work we do. About 2 years ago, we were working with a government body, specifically the municipality of Punjab and certain city municipalities in Karnataka. And one of the conversations that we were having with them is how do we adopt AI into the active citizenship and the urban planning landscape. And someone came up with the idea of why don't we use AI to build citizen chatbots. So we thought about it. We studied the problem at length. And one of the findings from our research was that currently it takes about 2 weeks on average in India to file a civic complaint. So, say, for example, if a tree falls in your locality and it damages some of the electrical wires, it damages some of the road and some of the piping along the road. And now you have a civic issue in your neighborhood. In order to properly file a civic complaint, say if you are a resident in that neighborhood and you want to be an active citizen, we found that it was about a 2 week process from finding the right municipal office, getting your complaint registered, ensuring that it passes through the secretary's desk. You get a complaint ID. It's quite a cumbersome process, and we found that with an AI chatbot, you can essentially bring that 2 week timeline down to 2 minutes, where I can take a photograph of the incident that occurred, upload it onto my WhatsApp chatbot, use an AI bot that would read the image, kind of detect what category it falls under, send it to the relevant municipal office based on the location that I share, and I can share, a voice note that goes with it. And within 2 minutes, send me back a case ID saying that your complaint is being processed and worked on. We built this prototype, very, very proud of it. It really solved the problem for the citizens in mind. And came the day that we had to go and present it now to the commissioner of the municipality. And we go to the meeting, we showcase our solution, very, very proud of our work. And then the guy stops right after seeing the demo and says, "So are you telling me you're going to use AI now to 10x the number of complaints that I get as a municipality and do nothing to help me in actually resolving these complaints?" And just like that, the insight hit. We thought we were on a brilliant use case, until it finally took a different perspective to say, if I had 500 complaints, now I will have 10,000 complaints or 20,000 complaints. And you've made it so much easier for citizens to file complaints. But was your fundamental problem that you're trying to solve, or the assumption that you had, was that we are not aware of the complaints in our city, and only if citizens, found a way to complain more and send us more complaints, then we would really know what problems our city faces and actually solve it. Um, and then he essentially reverted to say that why not instead use AI to coordinate between government departments and issues so that we can actually resolve complaints faster. And one of the key learnings that we took away from that is that many times it's so easy to adopt AI into solutions and actually end up solving the wrong problems, or solving problems that actually don't require solving. Meaning it's a problem that exists, but it's not actually the most critical problem. And the challenge with adopting AI is that it accelerates everything that you put it towards. AI makes things faster, it makes it more efficient, it makes it quicker to manage a lot of data than if a human were to do it. And so we have suddenly this new potential of technology that can accelerate efforts. And it takes a lot of figuring out to decide where to accelerate efforts and where not to. And so that's kind of why we do the work that we do. A large part of our work is figuring out the types of use cases that do work and don't work, as well as publishing the learnings for why they potentially work or don't work. So with that, I'll get to my presentation. I hope you can see my screen. Just a quick thumbs up if you can. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Great. So let me jump in. People+AI is about a 1.5-year-old organization. that's largely working in the Gen AI space. And we've been founded by a man named Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who was prior to this the chairman of Infosys, chairman of Aadhaar UPI. And so we kind of came from a group of technologists that were very, very focused on public technology. And when ChatGPT came into the market in November 22, it kind of took AI from being something that's just done in a lab to now a conversation that people actually have in their households and talk about how they're using ChatGPT to write emails, write cover letters, write blogs and do all sorts of interesting research. And very quickly we realized that AI has now become commoditized. And so what we began to look at, and now that AI is available in the market, commoditized in the smartphone and laptop of most users, what can we now build with it? What are the use cases that arise? And one of the things that we strongly arrived at as a thesis statement was that India's AI strategy should be use case led. For those of you who are technologists in the room, kind of the fundamental design of AI currently that people traditionally think of is data. It starts with data. And when you have large amounts of data, you can then build algorithms and models around it where you train data to make predictions, find patterns, use existing data to now generate new data. And essentially, in order to power all of this, you need a lot of data center compute. So these are CPUs and GPUs that literally physically exist in data centers that enable all these things to happen. But in this traditional model, what people often, if you look at this as a traditional model, what people usually ignore is that there's a huge need for talent. And there's a huge need for figuring out the types of use cases that will actually take this as a theoretical technology to now being an applied technology that we can actually use for real world applications and solving real world problems. So that's largely been our approach. We function as a lab that figures out, okay, who is the community that can brainstorm together the types of use cases that can really shift the needle of impact in India. And when making presentations like this, one of the questions we often get asked is, do we even need to adopt AI? Like, will AI eventually take my job? Will AI replace, humans that I have on field? And the quick answer to that question is no. AI so far, from what we've seen, has really reduced jobs to a very small degree. And it's very, very few types of jobs that are actually severely impacted by AI. But here's what we have found. We have found that professionals and companies who use AI usually outperform professionals and other companies that don't use AI. For example, my sister is a technical writer. And when ChatGPT first came out into the market, there were a lot of people within, the writing profession that said, oh, now with AI, we're all out of jobs. Nobody will hire us anymore. And 3 years later, that is very, very far from true. What we have found, though, is that all these writers are now adopting AI tools to increase the speed of their writing by probably 5 times. So if it took them maybe a day to write a good article, now probably they can do it in 2 hours or 3 hours, and they can actually output 3 or 4 articles in the day. So it's made them significantly more productive, but it's not actually changed jobs. It's not really changed industries as we expected yet. And I don't think it will, and as easily as people often say. But another big thing that we realized is that if you're trying to build good products in the market, it usually starts with a prototype. How many of you are familiar with the Birkenstock sandal? It is a 250-year-old German design that was made by a man named Mr. Birkenstock. And this design has been around for the last 150 years, this specific design of sandal. However, during COVID, for whatever reason, in the early 2020s, in 2020, 2021, around that time, it was figured out in the Indian market that this design of sandal is very popular. And slowly, everyone took this one prototype And now you have probably 15 to 50 versions of it in the market, from West Side to Bata to Neiman's to Soulplay to Marks and Spencer, H&M, Zara, Zudio. You name the clothing brand, and there's a very, very high chance that they all have a sandal design that is almost exactly the same, if not very similar, to this original Birkenstock sandal. And I think the principle of that applies, where if you can figure out which types of solutions work in a market, it then allows, many more players to come in and adopt a similar solution for a different demographic and at a different price point, slightly different, region of the country or different target audience. But what we have seen is that prototypes work. And when you build good prototypes, it enables widespread adoption in the market. Another unique finding that we found in our work is that when you think about technology in India, it's fundamentally different. Most AI currently is being built with a very, very Western lens. So solutions that work in the US don't necessarily work the same in India. How many of you have? I remember the first time I went to the US and I walked into a Walmart store. And after having come from India, going into a Walmart store for the first time was a very phenomenal experience. There were aisles and aisles of different types of groceries. There were probably 50 types of cereals, hundreds of different types of candy, and I'd never seen such a large variety in this literally this 50,000 square foot mega store where they sold groceries. And coming from India, it was the most phenomenal thing at the time. Um, until I had a friend from the US come to India recently, and I was lying down on my couch and ordering some groceries. And in less than 8 minutes, there was a guy that rang my doorbell and handed me a bag of groceries, and he was absolutely blown away. And was totally amazed at how you can, in the comfort of your own home, just share a simple location on a mobile app, and there will be someone that will run to a dark store that is in some, pocket of a warehouse in the city and bring you your groceries in a paper bag. And it's exactly what you want in less than 10 minutes. And what was starkly obvious was that innovation in the US versus innovation in India is different. You can't design it the same. If you try to use the exact same approach, it might work for a little while, but when you scale it to the masses, it usually the context and the problems it's trying to solve is very different, and it doesn't quite apply. Um, Another funny example that I like to give people is that about 3 months ago, I had visited a car exhibition in Mumbai. And for those of you who are from Mumbai, there's this Nesco Convention Center in Goregaon East. That's this huge convention center. And they had all these fancy cars. There were these Mercedes, self-driving cars with airplane doors and wheels that move in three directions. And it was quite phenomenal, the showcase of technology that was displayed. The irony, though, was that most people who went for that car exhibition had taken an Uber to go there because parking is difficult. And majority of the Ubers that they went in were Maruti Wagonars with a Bluetooth speaker and um, and a basic CNG tank and a manual drive. And it became blatantly obvious that the technology that we showcase in a convention center and in exhibitions versus what we finally actually adopt on field is very different. It comes at a different price point. The innovation is very differently designed, and one eventually is designed to solve real world problems and actually be applied into real world challenges. And so when you're building, solutions in India, you'll have to give that thought, especially if you're trying to scale solutions in India. It's very easy to build really cool, augmented reality, virtual reality types of solutions that we think could reform classrooms, and maybe it could. I just don't think we have the infrastructure and the capacity to do it just yet. What we are finding, those are the simple chatbots that are working, and millions of students are adopting it. Hundreds of thousands of farmers are using simple WhatsApp chatbots that are AI powered, but not as flashy, not as futuristic, where we have these metaverse goggles and thinking about AI in that landscape. So I will pause over here and share with you essentially a few principles to think about when you adopt AI. And I was mentioning this to Sushma earlier, that one of the things that we often try to use is what we call as a sandbox approach. If you're working at a company currently, or you're going through a career transition and you're kind of navigating, how do I begin to adopt AI in the work that I individually do, or in the work that my company does as a whole? Um, One thing that we often recommend is essentially following what we call as a sandbox principle. If you think of a very, very large garden, and in the center of that garden is a small sandbox area where the children go and play. And if they play across the entire garden, most times their parents will lose them. There's a risk of getting lost, falling into a ditch, getting stuck in a bush, and all sorts of risks. And so typically what parents do is that they put their children in this sandbox, and that's kind of a safe zone where their children can run around and play without too much of risk and hazard. And when you think about adopting technology, especially technology like generative AI solutions, I think a good and safe principle to follow is to figure out what are simple sandboxes in my scope of work. For example, we have seen many doctors adopt Gen AI, not so much for giving medical advice to patients. That's risky, it's not regulated, it's a difficult thing to do. What we have seen them do, though, is after they write a patient prescription, they upload it to a WhatsApp chatbot that then sends automated reminders to the patient with the specific prescription that the doctor wrote out. And now we're using Gen AI chatbots to send follow-up messages to patients to remind them when to take their medication and go through their treatment, to drop them a phone call, like an automated phone call, just before they need to schedule the next appointment or consultation. And so you see a lot of safe ways to experiment with AI and adopt it in typically what we call as a sandbox, which is a safe, risk, I won't say absolutely risk-free, but risk-mitigated zone. And from there, we can begin to increase the scope of the sandbox until we can try more and more experiments, um, and essentially see that work out. When you think about the adoption of AI, and especially in the work that we do, typically the problem that we're currently trying to solve is that you have a lot of tech vendors that can build solutions for you, provided you give them a very exact requirement of what you're trying to build. So you'll have foundational tech companies, you'll have service agencies, you'll have engineering support agencies that can do the work of coding and build out a solution for you, and you'll have in-house software developers. And then you have a series of domain specific companies like accounting firms, legal firms, hospitals, uh, educational institutes that are specialized in their domain and they're specialized in their field, and they're excited about the potential to adopt AI into their domain, but they're not quite sure on which types of use cases will really work. And they're not quite sure really in how those use cases must be designed. And so even if they were to go to a vendor and could afford to pay someone to do this, to really do the research work of saying this is how to design a certain prototype for your business problem in the context that you're in, we found that to be a gap in the market. And we found that there's a huge gap in general for people that are coming together and thinking about the types of use cases that really work and don't work across different business functions, as well as just everyday life applications. And that's kind of the work that we do at People+AI. We try to figure out what types of AI use cases work across industries and domains. So we've worked in agriculture. We've done some work in climate when it comes to like sustainable water practices or clean energy. We've done a few projects in education and healthcare. We've recently expanded into the legal domain, access to government services, access to schemes and policies, and providing support over there. And largely, what we do is we go industry by industry and we study the nature of that industry, the different pertinent problems that exist in that domain, and with that in mind, then begin to figure out the types of AI use cases that could or couldn't work in a specific field. And then we begin to showcase these as the potential of applications in education or healthcare or marketing or in sales funnels, for example. And with a series of partners, we then deploy this as pilots, which would then get adopted further and further. And like I said, it's a simple prototype that slowly begins to spread in the market, and that's eventually how we reach population scale deployment. Um, just as a fun fact, we don't do this as a small team of experts. We actually do this, and that's where I came across Shanti and Ashok. We had a conversation about a month ago, and they were asking, how do people get involved in this? Currently, our approach to doing this is that we have a community of about 1,435 people signed up to volunteer last year. These are, like I said, seasoned professionals that are working across different domains, and many of them are otherwise from technology backgrounds. And essentially, we have a really interesting group of people that, and then every few weeks we post new projects. In fact, let me actually open my tab and show you, if that's okay. I'll show you how our community runs. So we have a website, and on our website we have a series of projects. What people do is that they come in and they showcase different ideas that they have of where they could potentially adopt AI. Let me show you an example. So we have about currently 150 submitted ideas, and a person, I think 2 weeks ago, had uploaded an idea of, can you use AI to provide audio guides that are tied to a location? And the example that they gave us was, supposing I go to the Red Fort and I give a prompt that I'm really interested in architecture and culture. And I'm not so interested in the history. I'm more interested on getting a tour of the Red Fort from an architectural point of view. Can you then develop an AI guide that will provide you audio guides similar to how a tourist guide would, but tell you stories about the Red Fort in terms of how the architecture was built, how it how it changed and was developed over the years, and provide you like a very simple tour travel guide in the language of your choice. So since it's being used with AI, if you're from Kerala, you can choose to have this in Malayalam over English, or you could have it in Telugu. This entire story narration voice guide provided to you. And so essentially what people do is they come and they submit a series of ideas here. Every now and then we have volunteers that say, I'm really looking to start a new project. I picked up an idea and I wrote a 2-page proposal on it. Typically at that stage, what we do is we do a quick vetting of it, and then we publish this idea on our project board, and other volunteers who are part of our community then come and work on this idea with them. So typically we have a team of anywhere between 5 to 10 volunteers that all excited about a certain AI idea. And over a span of 3 months, they have a few people that are from that domain, say, for example, education. So you have a few people that are experts in education. You have a few people that are software developers in terms of, front end, back end engineers, UI, UX designers. You have a few people that are product managers and product strategists. You have a few people that might say, I'm really good at business development. So if you build out a solution, I will help you, take it to market and figure out who would be your early adopters and partners and in developing this. And essentially that group of, 5 to 10 volunteers collectively have worked on about 30 different use case ideas. And I think about 10 of them currently are being deployed in the market wider and further. Many of them have gone on to start companies and startups in this space. And all of this is being done through a community approach. So, and want to be cognizant that I've now spoken for about, I think, almost half an hour. So I'm going to pause here. I think it's a good segue now to open it up into conversations. I was doing a talk with all the business heads of the Tata Group. So a few people from Tata Steel, a few people from Tata Power, Tata Trends in terms of all their fashion outlets. And each of them were essentially having a Q&A in terms of where could AI work for me. And it was just a very fascinating discussion. And every time I get into forums like this, I know that people oftentimes have questions about where can I use AI. I've read some certain things about AI and certain concerns that I have. And I think forums like this are a great place to discuss it. So at this point, Shanti, I'll pause and pass it back in case anyone would like to have a discussion.
I can lead with the question.
Yeah.
And from the perspective of a person wanting to volunteer, what is the process? And to everybody in the group, I'm thinking of volunteering myself. Okay. What next? What do we need to do? So talk to us about the process.
So, so typically what the easiest way to volunteer is one of two things. And if I go back to my screen, this is on our website. So just in case you're wondering where this is the homepage of our website. It's people+.ai. And essentially, we've always worked with the approach of how do you build in public. So all of our ideas are publicly listed. And let me mention that when I say our ideas, I don't mean specifically just our team on our payroll. When I say our ideas, it's people within our community. So it's about 200 people that have contributed different ideas of where they feel AI could work. So there one of two ways to go about it. You can either be someone that is an ideator, where if you have ideas of how AI could work, this essentially is a large catalog of different AI ideas that are some are in healthcare. We have a few in finance and agriculture, and the different domains that we've also listed in. And so many people submit ideas that they're very excited about. What we do from time to time is then pick up these ideas and convert them into projects. Because ideas, just on a board doesn't really make impact. It's a good starting point. It's a good place where people can kind of see, or kind of get their creative juices flowing. But then we actually take these ideas and we convert them into projects. And for every new project that we launch, there are open roles. Recently, we're actually in the process of restructuring some of these projects. So we've paused open roles for this week. But if you come back next week, you'll find more open roles there. So say, for example, there's a new project called CV Sati, which there was the head of ads and payments at Myntra, the online e-commerce brand. His name is Santosh Kevlani. So he came with an idea and said, how do we help build CVs for blue collar workers? So your plumber, electrician, carpenter that need certain, paperwork to show their skills and show their experience and aspire to get higher paying gigs and jobs. And yet a big challenge is how do you actually showcase your work? And then they're working on building a simple voice-based chatbot where that can generate a phone call, for example, to a plumber. And this voice bot will essentially ask them a series of questions about their work, how long they've been in the industry, what types of job roles do they specifically do. And at the end of that conversation, transcribe that entire thing and send it back to them on WhatsApp as a digital CV that is fully AI generated, but it takes all the information from that phone call that it has with the person. So without even, in many cases, having to be literate, you could have a perfectly made with no, mistakes and spelling errors and, challenges that are faced. You can have a CV sent to your phone in 5, 7 minutes over WhatsApp that, in the PDF version that is required. And that's a project that is, now being undertaken. So
Now,
typically,
would you offer this as a service to companies? Example, let's say second careers, and we are um, very committed to use of AI and any new technology that will improve people's lives. All right. And we are constantly building our own use cases. Could we use your platform? Because I see this as a crowdsourced
yeah.
initiative. You're applying it to social causes, but can you open it up to companies as well? Is that part of your game plan?
So let me mention it like this. I really hope that let me show this diagram just for context. Everyone on the demand side, everyone on the demand side and everyone on the supply side is usually for-profit companies.
Ah,
We do this as a not-for-profit, as a way of kind of reducing risk on both sides, so that the adoption of
lovely,
AI is easier. But
lovely.
if you think about AI, it's an expensive technology, and unless you have a revenue model around it or a way to make it sustainable, it's very difficult to really scale solutions. And so, in fact, most of these solutions have the potential to be commercial market products. Um, what we
Fantastic.
do to start off is do this kind of as like an R&D lab where we build out the prototypes, and then we share this knowledge in the open source domain so that companies can come and build on top of it, leverage it, adopt these solutions into their business operations. Um, most of these solutions have an angle of social impact, but all of them also have an angle of financial sustainability. Otherwise, it's just very hard to actually build to scale and build for the long term.
No, you're absolutely right. Um, Any questions? I see a comment from Professor Bhattacharya. If you consider AI to be a black hole, how do you demystify it? Sandeep, that's exactly what People Plus AI is trying to do by practically applying AI. But over to you, David, in case you
So,
have some insights. And then I'll go to Vijaya next. Yeah.
yeah. Let me go back to this slide, if that's okay. When you typically think of AI, it's a lot of data. In fact, if you look at an OpenAI or Gemini model by Google, it has scraped a large portion of the internet in order to have sufficient data to train your models on. So the black hole when it comes to AI is often who holds this data, where does this data lie, and when I use these solutions, are you then using my data to further train your model? For example, there are many mental health chatbots where people go on their chatbot and talk about very, very personal issues like my I'm facing certain types of trouble at home. I'm being abused at work. I am contemplating, harming myself. And very, very private, personal conversations people are now having on these AI chatbots. And then the ethical question arises is that people who have used that bot, are you then taking their data and further training your models on it? And after that, is the ownership of that data of whoever has used that service, do they no longer have ownership of that data? And when you think about AI ethics, AI governance, it is oftentimes at a models and data level. And that's why companies, at least in India, tend to prefer to use open source technologies, um, where you can be very, very confident that if certain, data is being uploaded onto these models, it is not then going into a closed source domain where you don't have access to it anymore. You can't really ensure the privacy and safety of your customers. These are big concerns. And when you think about, why AI is sometimes termed as a black hole, it is based on, where this data is regulated and captured. Um, Recently, there was came in the news about a whistleblower that was talking about how OpenAI collected certain data, and I think he was uh, uh, an Indian teenager, probably just out of college, 24 years old, and was then later found dead in his apartment. It came in the news. There was a lot of talk about it, but it's usually around the ethics of data and who manages this data, who saves this data. It's actually a very big deal. I'm not sure if that fully answered your question, but it's a huge topic and something that we can spiral towards. But I know Vijaya hands up.
Yeah, hi.
Vijaya, and then after that, Munish. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So my question is, suppose I put up a use case in your website and it gets approved, and I'm one of the volunteers, and let's say there are other volunteers who sign up, but
Yeah.
I assume there are other resources, for example, which are required, say, for example, the computing power and all that. So that's going to be, funded by People+AI, is it? Is that correct?
Yeah. So typically what we do, and Shanti, I'll give access to my deck later. So one of the ways we go about it is, let me just find the exact slide. Yeah, so this is a slide. So typically we go across 5 stages. There's an idea where, say, someone has an idea, they submit it. We then review that idea, convert it into a project. From that project, we build out a tech prototype of, to kind of demonstrate this is how, this idea can work in this field, and solve problems. What we then do is we find partners that could potentially adopt this prototype and pilot it out. Like I said, it's always safer to start by testing it with just 100 users. Um, for example, there was a company called Meesho that is one of India's largest e-commerce companies in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. They adopted People+AI prototype, started out with just a few hundred customers, and now they're running a lot of their customer support operations through it. So typically at that stage, post the pilot, what we do is that we then share the learnings, we share the insights, we share the playbook, the code, in terms of building that solution to companies. And because it's open source, it's not only to one company, it's to as many companies that are interested to adopt this. And that can then become a technology that they adopt and sustain the cost for as they deploy to their customers. So say, for example, when Meesho adopted one of our prototypes, then the operational cost of running it for Meesho customers was borne by Meesho. But all the R&D cost and the piloting cost and the infrastructural design cost to build it was subsidized by a community like People+AI. So the operational and implementation cost, once you take it to scale, is still borne by the company because they have revenue models that support this. But all the R&D cost and piloting and design, prototyping and research cost is what is typically open source.
Got that. But I think my second question, I think someone has already asked from the chat. So
Right.
who owns the API?
Yeah, so that's a question Munish Ahuja also has, that who owns the IP for this? And of course he wants to know what is the software that is used to build.
Yeah. So that's a good question. A lot of the work that we have done has principally always been open source, which is why our ideas are publicly listed. The projects we do are publicly listed. The documentation for the products we've built are publicly listed as well. Um, so what we found is one of two things. If you really have good ideas, there's still, there's still a significant cost that's required in adopting an idea once it's validated. Say, for example, in order to build, we had a bot that we built called JKB, and it was quite a revolutionary bot. Currently, there are about 25 companies that have adopted this to almost all of their customers. To build that bot in its early design and innovation took us about 6 months of work, and it took probably, somewhere in the range of 15, 20 lakhs to really develop. But now for every company that wants to deploy it to their thousands and hundreds of thousands of their customers, that'll be an operational cost that is, separate from the development cost and the design cost. So typically what we do is we take on the development, the design, the R&D cost, but then the operational cost of it, which is basically your working capital, then is borne by companies who actually adopt these solutions. Um, that's how we've always functioned. So, and the ownership of it is then it's listed publicly. We recognize the volunteers that have built it. In many cases, we have volunteers who have built it that have gone on to build companies, and they're kind of like early adopters, and you have a first mover advantage, that are providing these services and solutions in the market. So we've seen cases of that where people first volunteered, and then after they validated that this idea works, have gone on to build a startup around it. In cases like that, we actually support the startup and we help them get their initial visibility, first few customers, things like that. But the principle that we work by is that the core idea continues to remain open source. So if another startup, say, were to come a year and a half later and say, we really like that idea, we also want to work on it, they have the documentation available to them that's publicly, published, that they can also take and build. So that way, that's essentially how it works, and so yeah. I hope that answers your question.
So, David,
Mhm.
there are 5 more questions.
Yeah.
Okay. There is one from Tirumal, okay, which I'll get to. But before I get to Tirumal, Vishi Narayana has a question. How do you link the supply and demand sides? How long is a typical engagement? And do you work with a set of providers to create prototypes? And what's the end state?
Yeah.
And the list of questions are growing. I have 7 more questions.
It's
Okay.
okay. We'll cover it all. I'll go faster now.
Yes,
So
please.
typically a project will last anywhere between 3 to 6 months, and this is from idea to, I would say, end of the prototype and early pilot stage. When you go into the pilot stage, then you're having to test it out over probably a 2 month period, and it then is dependent on which companies you choose to enter that pilot adoption. So that timeline really varies from project to project, but typically from idea to working prototype that is out in the open is somewhere around 3 months or less. Provided that the idea is good, it doesn't need to be pivoted several times over. In some cases it has, but most times we review those ideas in advance so that it doesn't require too much of repivoting once you start. The second question I saw someone put in terms of how are we funded to do this, or how do we recover costs? Here's the good thing. We've set it up as a volunteer community, is that then, frankly, if I'm being very honest, we have volunteers that are so smart and so well qualified that if we were to try to hire them, we would have never been able to afford to have them on our team. Like, if I'm just being very honest with you. At one point, we had the CTO of HCL Technologies in India come and volunteer with us for a 3 month period. His salary alone would have been in our entire staff salary. If I'm just being very blunt over here, and yet he dedicated 5 hours a week over a 3 month period, and he was greatly, benefited from his experience working with us. He enjoyed, the types of projects and ideas that he came across, and we tremendously benefited from, expertise like that at the table. And so the cost of running a community, thankfully, is not very high. The rest of the costs in terms of, basic prototyping, some internal staff salaries. We have a team of about 8 people, so it's a small team. We have a philanthropist by the name of Nandan Nilkani, who is the co-founder, former chairman of Aadhaar and Infosys, and is doing this as kind of a passion project through his personal philanthropy. So that's at least how we have an operating budget, which has served us well.
Fabulous. Tirumal, can you turn on everyone when I call out your question? Just turn on your video if you feel like. Tirumal has a very important question. I think this is a question that many people will have. How does one with no AI related technology knowledge get
Yeah.
involved with these projects?
So what we have found is that sometimes it's not so much a technical problem we're trying to solve, but a domain problem. Meaning, we know how to build a chatbot, but supposing we're trying to build a solution for government schools in India, and we don't know about, the landscape, uh, the, types of teachers that teach in the school, the way these school management systems work. Just, the knowledge of coding a chatbot is not good enough. And many times we need more knowledge on the domain side of it, as well as knowledge from market experts, people that are good with, strategy, with user research, understanding, the needs of customers. And what we've soon realized is that most of these are not software development skills. They're just human skills, frankly, that and that have, a very basic understanding of how the technology works, just in order to figure out where it can be applied to, but don't necessarily need to have the skills of building it. Let me show you one project, that specifically meets this criteria. We have a project that recently launched called Chini Kam, which is how do you build personalized chatbots to help with diabetes prevention. It's commonly said that India is the diabetes capital of the world. And can you build personalized solutions that will help people in, especially in type 2's diabetes prevention? Software developers will not solve this problem. Even though we have software developers on our team, we need people that are nutritionists or people that have lived experience of, actually having, been pre-diabetic and come out of that. And those types of insights will typically then, help guide the design of technology in a human-centered way. I hope that answers your question, Thirumal.
All right. So here's Krishnan Subramaniam raises a point. He says he understands the model, and at some point, volunteers need to be paid for their time and effort. What's your
Yeah.
take on it? I have been adopting AI for a lot of my work and happy to help, but should have some sort of a payback system.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So here's typically how we've structured it. People+AI, our core team, are not like really project managers per se. Largely what we've done is we've built this community, and now most of the ideas from the community are by, people that are passionate about certain causes, but don't necessarily have the funds yet to know whether it works in the market or not, but they have a really good idea. And so typically the most that they're able to do, just given their resources and capacity, is that they bring their idea to a community like People+AI and find other like-minded people to help them, support them, and work together on this project for 3 months. So the initial ask is, can we do this project as a commercial-free venture for 3 months? And that's typically in the investment of 3 to 5 hours a week. over a 3-month period where it's zero commercials. But post that, once the idea works, once there's reasonable confidence from everyone within that group, that this is actually something that can be taken to the market, then there's a lot of commercial interest from the volunteers who actually want to build businesses around this, or really want to take these prototypes and take it back to their company and be something that it can be deployed um, with a commercial angle. But what we found is, for people to really be creative when it comes to ideating and participate together so that that knowledge sharing happens, that first initial period has to be, sadly, in most cases, commercial free. Otherwise, what typically happens is you have a few startups that will build all of their solutions in-house and never share the knowledge of how it was built. And so if you want to adopt it, all you can do is get an end product, but you don't know what it takes to actually build it yourself. And what we want to do is democratize that information. But post that, once you have the product and the solution, whoever chooses to, take it, run with it, has the potential to make, you know, revenue, which we encourage people to do.
So a segue to that, Sri Krish, he wants to know, will People+AI help with data to provide
Yeah.
and validate the product idea? Because that is the quintessential problem of many AI companies. How do you validate it? Where do you get the right source of data?
So, two types of data. One is you have general language data, which there are many open source companies that are doing. One leading company is called AI for Bharat, that is also funded by Nandan Nilekani. And they have built what's now known as India's largest open source data set of Indian languages. So they have data across 22 languages, and a really wide field of subjects, from voice data to text data. And all of this is open source and available. Now you come then towards industry specific domain data. Say, for example, if you're deploying a use case in healthcare, uh, let's say for just conversation's sake, you're building an AI bot to detect patterns in X-rays. Now, just having text data alone is not good enough. You need certain, medical imaging data. For solutions like that, we typically partner with a company that is willing to run the pilot, and we at least start off by leveraging the data that they have for the purpose of deploying it within their company as the first mover, and so they have the advantage of being an early adopter. And once that the pilot works, you validate the solution. It then becomes an incentive for other companies to open up their data so that they could adopt the solution. That's typically how it's worked. Otherwise, it's very difficult to based on the type of use case, the type of data that you need is quite varied.
So I just have a follow-up question on that. So, in the case of, I mean, given that you work closely with Mr. Nilekani, you also works closely with the government, and if we are, building some sort of a healthcare solution, let's say related to cancer or something like that, with the number of government cancer institutions, like the Cancer Research Institute in Chennai or the Trivandrum Medical Center and so on and so forth, different places. A anonymized set of data could also help. Does People+AI consider that kind of data to build prototypes?
100%. And oftentimes there's a technique known as data masking, where if it's not yet anonymized, if you can have a company willing to share, probably the records of 100 patients, say in this example, and before we, you receive that data, there's a way to anonymize it where you essentially just scramble all the names, so you give them some generic name, but the rest of the patient file is accurate. But now you're not able to link it back to a specific person. In those cases, it becomes both, legally acceptable, as well as companies agree to sharing that type of data.
Great. So we're down to the wire. I'm going to combine two questions. This is from NVS and Sohan. Sohan wants to know if you provide access to data and access to compute resources for
Yeah.
volunteer activities. And NVS wants to know, how do you pick the companies that you showcase the solutions to?
Yeah. So for compute resources, yes, and we thankfully have larger compute companies that have been generous to believe in our cause and donate credits to us. So we've had companies like AWS, Azure, as well as many, Indian data centers that have given a line of credits to say, if you build a good prototype, at least to test it out, here's enough credit and compute to, get it off the ground. So we oftentimes rely on generous contributions like that from compute companies. When it comes to designing and figuring out the models to use, it really varies based on the use case. Like what we found is that oftentimes OpenAI is a very capable model. But if you're running a basic chatbot, you don't need the most capable model. Sometimes you just need the most cost efficient. And then you'd probably use a 3.5 version, or you'd use like say for example a fine-tuned llama 3 that is an open source model that Meta has released. DeepSeek has very very affordable APIs and services that they provide. Where you tend to need more capable models are in two use cases: anything that requires image and analysis, because image readers are currently expensive and it requires a lot of compute to really have accurate reading. So say, for example, use cases that require medical imaging, the storage costs are higher, the compute costs are higher, and then the APIs that you use are a little bit more expensive. But if you're doing something on like a voice-based solution, like for example, there's a farmer chatbot that talks to farmers in their local language and provides them guidance on which crops to grow at different times of the year and in different soil types. Um, that can be run quite inexpensive, and you don't need a very advanced model to run that. You have some use cases that are used to review legal documentation. You need a pretty advanced model to ensure that all the documents are correctly analyzed. There's no hallucination. The capability is there. So it sadly, I'm not able to give you a very specific answer, because it based on the use case will then determine which is the best model and how expensive it would be to build.
No, but this is truly a sandbox. Okay, so
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you are stretching the analogy of a sandbox, is that you are allowing innovation and supporting that innovation. So it's not a cookie cutter answer for a lot of things, and a
Yeah.
lot would depend on the power of the use case.
What we found is probably three varieties of choices. You either look for which is the most capable model, or you look at which is the most cost-effective model, and the third one is a unique one. You then look at which is most private, like in terms of privacy and data regulation. It could either be privacy related or it could be language related. For example, right now there's no good language technology in Assamese. And so everyone that's trying to deploy AI solutions for Assam have very few options of, API keys to adopt. And based on the language you're trying to, deploy in, you'll realize that I had 15 options for English, but for Telugu, I really only have 3 good options. And then it kind of forces you into making a prioritized choice.
Right.
So, yeah.
Fabulous. Shanti, we've addressed all the questions. Back to you.
Thank you so much. David, what a fascinating session. And personally, I found that there is so much I learned, so many areas where AI and technology can be applied. Farmers, school teachers, health, the Punjab urban development case you spoke about. And I think we have on our platform professionals with domain experience in almost all of these areas that you spoke about. So I'm really looking forward to the partnership that we can build in terms of how our professionals can be volunteers for the initiatives at People+AI. I want to conclude with what one of our professionals, T.S. Venkatesh, he's been a regular on every webinar that we've held. He shared with us his perspectives on volunteering. He said volunteering has three stakeholders: the project on hand, and certainly at People+AI, you seem to have plenty of projects. The hiring organization, which is People+AI, and the volunteer, which is our professionals, right? So these are the three elements or stakeholders in volunteering. Except the compensation piece, which is nil, the other factors of hiring, training, and delivery, accountability should be as if the person is hired for a hefty compensation per month, which means we are going to use gold standard for actually picking the volunteers and expect that they will deliver outstanding outcomes. And then the question is, what's in it for each stakeholder?
Yeah.
Project delivered fine. The hiring organization is really happy. And most importantly, volunteer gets the satisfaction of learning hard and is poised for paid projects and opportunities. I think it wonderfully answers the question that Krishnan Subramanian had also raised, that, well, the project itself is hard learning, but it's a wonderful opportunity to use that learning outside for other opportunities. Yeah.
Can I add just one thing to that? So I think one thing that usually helps to think about it is that it's not really speaking a People+AI project. Like, for example, the best way to think of us is a platform for project ideas. Now, say, for example, just for the sake of this community, if Shanti were to come to People+AI and says, here's an idea that Shanti is very passionate about, but doesn't know how to fully build herself. So she can come with her idea, leverage the People+AI community, find 8 other volunteers to help her on this idea, and together in 3 months' time, maybe they'll have a great business opportunity. And so what we try to do at People+AI is build a community where people can bring their ideas and projects. Most of the projects that you see there are actually not seeded by us. It's just hosted by us. And people within our community are just very excited and don't have the resources yet to work on it. Where they actually, like, say, if Shanti, if I were to continue on that example, to expect you to now pay the salaries of the 8 people that join your project team is a hefty ask, right? When you're still testing something out. But at the 3 months later, now that you have a real solution that works, if any one of you from the group were to want to make this into a commercial venture, then it's not unfair to ask for remuneration at that point. But what we try to do is make this a safe zone where people can test out an idea first before they know whether it really works or not. And so most of our projects are people from our community finding other people in our community to collaborate with them on. So I hope that that gives clarity in terms of how we work. And
fantastic session, David. There's a lot of congratulations, an excellent session kind of messages. There's a lot more questions, but we will stay in touch and we'll see how
Okay.
second careers can be the bridge here and help people get onto the platform. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining this very engaging session. Thanks a lot, David.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thanks.
spending
Thank you,
the
David.
hour. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.